Anthropologists tell us that storytelling is central to human existence. Every culture we know engages in storytelling, and thousands of years ago, people would gather around their fires to tell stories. And people still often call a rich life a storied life. Put simply, humans are creatures of story. American screenwriter, director, and producer Andrew Stanton once said in a TED Talk that the greatest story commandment is, make me care. Emotionally, intellectually, aesthetically, just make me care. We are all here today with the ultimate hope of making the public excited about Quindaro. Basically, we're here to try to help make people care. Now, I'm going to tell you the story of John Morgan Walden here. He, in the mid-1850s, came to the Kansas Territory with an altruistic heart and the determination to do everything he could to abolish slavery. And so our story begins. Once upon a time, on February 11th, 1831, when the sun was in total eclipse, John Walden was born on a farm in Hamilton County, Ohio. Just after John's second birthday, his mother died of consumption, leaving behind John and his father. And they then went to live with John's grandparents and his uncle William on a farm near Cincinnati. When he was only 19, John moved to the city to work a job loading products such as flour, pork, coal, and wood onto barges to be sent down the Ohio River. At the time, he had absolutely no religious scruples, and he loved drinking whiskey on Saturday nights. One night in a pub, when he was surrounded by drunk young men, he had a moment of clarity and insight. And he would later say that in this moment, he was captured by a fear about where his excessive drinking would lead him. And suddenly, he had a purpose. He was going to practice Christianity and advocate for its moral principles, especially as they related to slavery. Now, as we all know, there were different issues surrounding slavery. There was the economic issue of the South. There were the political issues, of state sovereignty and all of those things. But then there was also a third issue surrounding it, and that was people who were motivated by ideals, abolitionist ideals, like J.M. Walden right here. He felt like two main really terrible things that were going on is that he hated to know about that Africans were suffering greatly from being removed from their culture, from their families, from their loved ones, to be stripped up here from their homeland. And that really bothered him. He also very, very strongly believed that African people were in no way inferior to anyone else and that they should be treated as equals. And so, on an April day in 1857, after Walden was honored as a bishop of the Methodist Episcopal Church, he no longer was able to turn a deaf ear to the battle cries that echoed from the hills of the Kansas Territory. So he bought a printing outfit, he left his boyhood home in Ohio, took the train into Missouri. Several days later, he crossed over the river on steamship, and then finally he landed in Quindaro. Now, when he got there, one of the first things that he wanted to do was to give an update to his uncle, the one who had sort of become his surrogate father. And he wrote this letter. This is a letter that is archived, of course, and I'm going to read just part of it to you. He says, "Dear Uncle, I left Cincinnati Saturday, April 4th, got to St. Louis Sunday morning by riding all night. I stayed in St. Louis until Wednesday morning when I took the cars for Jefferson City, Missouri, where a daily line of packets run up the Missouri River. I am now in Kansas, reached here this evening a while before sundown, having traveled in all about 900 miles. I have stood the trip first rate, although the boat was so crowded that there was no comfort for the passengers. Of course, I cannot say how I shall like this place. It is new and wild, as different from Ohio as it could be. I am determined, however, to be contented until I accomplish what I came for. The season is very backward, and it will be about 2 weeks before the woods and prairies are green. Then I think it will be cheerful. I am on the bank of the Missouri River where steamers pass each way daily. We have plenty to eat, and a comfortable hotel to lodge in. Everything is quite as promising as I expected, and I feel that in less than a year, I will be free to return home. Wishing this to find you as it leaves me in good health, I am very truly yours, J.M. Walden. A couple weeks after Walden's arrival, the first issue of his newspaper came out. It was entitled The Chindawan. People have referenced it a few times earlier today. Also, someone mentioned that there was the word, Wyandotte word, meaning bundle of sticks. And I would actually have up here, I want you to notice that image. This is something that was, both of these were around in every issue of the newspaper that came out. The header up here, and then also this, I don't know if you can see it very well, but it is a bundle of sticks that are wrapped up. And he believed in the philosophy behind it of the bundle of sticks. He took it further to the adage of in union there is strength. And he very, very strongly believed in people coming together and in people uniting for a purpose. And this right here, these are two of the stories that ran in the first issue. These are kind of giving an overview of his vision. He was speaking to his audience saying, here's why I'm starting the newspaper, here's what I hope to do. And one of them is that he thought it was important for people to unite for the shared purpose. And also, he wrote in our paper, one over there, he wrote, I'm going to read part of it to you. He said, I say stand firmly by the right of let justice be done though the heavens may fall. So whenever power infringes upon sacred prerogatives, it is the duty of the oppressed to band themselves against it, for we find that in everything that elevates a people, union and freedom transcend division and slavery. A few months after Walden began publishing his newspaper, though his enthusiastic hopes were challenged by the pro-slavery Democrats. These armed and violent pro-slavery Missouri border ruffians, hoping to get the pro-slavery Lecompton Constitution passed, which was talked about a little bit early, they crossed the state border and they voted illegally. One specific fraudulent piece and happening, though, that I wanted to point out was at the pro-slavery Kickapoo precinct, where there were about 200 eligible voters. And the speaker over lunch mentioned some of this fraudulent voting that came on and actually had that exact same image up there. But in that Kickapoo precinct itself, there were 200 eligible voters, but more than 1,000 votes were cast there. And one of the issues that happened was that most of the Free Staters boycotted this referendum, and so they refused to even cast their vote. So as a result, the so-called popular vote, yet fraudulent, was to result in ratifying the pro-slavery Lecompton Constitution. Now, Walden used his newspaper as a platform for expressing his anger about these fraudulent practices and about everything that it might imply for the future. And a few days after these elections, he wrote an article that included this passage, and you can listen to the tone and the voice of it and hear his kind of anger and disgust. He says, the slave state men had to turn to Kickapoo, that vilest hole, which now disgraces our soil, as the place wherein to pile up a vote necessary to gain them a temporary triumph. What a desperate, degrading, and humiliating game they played to carry the day. Now, all of the issues of the Chindawan that were printed in the few weeks that were surrounding those fraudulent situations that were going on, Walden's anger came out more and more, and there was also a sense of concern. And that same sense of concern and the tone can be found also in another letter that he sent back to his uncle in Ohio. And I'm going to read a little bit of it as well from this one. A little bit of it talks just about daily life, but some of it also then you can start to hear his sense of concern about the strife that's going on. So this is in November 22nd of 1857, and Walden writes, Dear Uncle, I have given up all hope of visiting you this fall. The ice is already running in the Missouri River, and it will not be many days in all probability before the boats stop for the winter. Now is a very trying time. We are entering upon a difficult crisis. The Constitution which has been framed will make Kansas a slave state contrary to the will of more than 2/3 of the people, unless something can be done to prevent it. In whatever is done, it is essential to the interests of my paper that I should bear a part. For this reason, I must remain here. If I can help on the cause of freedom here at all, the little talent and influence I possess, I wish to devote to it. Freedom is the blessed boon for which we are so grateful to our forefathers, and we are conjured by their trials and sacrifices to preserve it for ourselves and those who may come after us. It is impossible to conjecture what will be done by the Free State Party. If the territorial legislature is not called together in time to kill the bogus Constitution, the government will be put in motion. The hope is to adjust affairs without any more civil war. But if war be necessary, the people are ready to take up their arms and assert their rights by force. I am in good health, except for a hacking cough which I have had 2 or 3 weeks, and which I fear will continue through the winter. I hope this will find you very well. Please remember me to my friends. Write me as often as you can, and please believe in me. Truly yours, J.M. Walden. Ultimately, Walden and the other Free Staters did not have to assert their rights by any kind of force, but a budding Free State Republican Party exposed the fraud and forced a new referendum to come up for vote. This time, the voters rejected the Lecompton Constitution by a vote of 10,226 to 138. So obviously, there were a lot of nefarious practices going on before this. So, 2 months later, the Free State Party elected their own delegates, and this was for the Kansas Territory's 3rd Constitutional Convention, which was to be held in Leavenworth, and actually Walden helped serve as a delegate for this, so again, he was very involved. This is an image of part of that 3rd Constitution. Again, it was drafted in Leavenworth. And it was the most radical of the 4 territory constitutions to be written. The Bill of Rights, this is one reason it was radical. The Bill of Rights referenced all men, not all women, but all men. And there is no discrimination or distinction between whether white man or African American man. It was just all men. Another thing about it was that it was saying that all slavery was to be banned from the Kansas Territory, future and present. It all had to be done away with. And it even provided a basic framework for women's rights. So it was the most radical of all of them to come out. Now, voters approved the Constitution. And an article ran in the Chindawan on May 18, 1858. And here you can hear Walden's voice or tone change quite a bit because he was actually claiming victory for the Free State Party. He felt like they had done some great things. And here's what he wrote. He says, this Leavenworth Constitution breathes all through it the doctrines of the Declaration of Independence and is all aglow with the best spirit of the founders and fathers of the Republic. Run up the banner then. No blots are upon it, no disgraceful prejudices mark it, nor dark doctrines of hate and malice are written upon it. Freedom and freedom only is now the watchword of the people of Kansas. Hurrah for the People's Constitution. So, less than a month later, on Saturday, June 12, 1858, Walden printed his final issue of the newspaper. And then he packed up his printing press and rode the steamship and iron horse back to his home in Ohio. Perhaps Walden left Quindaro to return to his home because he wanted to be home with his uncle. Perhaps he felt compelled to do more direct work with the church as a bishop. However, possibly, Walden stopped printing the Chindawan and left Quindaro because he felt that he had come there and completed what he had come to the Kansas Territory to do in the first place. And so, we come to the end of Walden's story, the story of his enduring efforts to make people care deeply about abolishing slavery in Kansas before he returned home. And now, going back to the beginning of my presentation, Andrew Stanton in his TED Talk once said that probably the greatest story commandment is make me care. Emotionally, intellectually, aesthetically, just make me care. And that is what I hope I have done today, and it is what we all need to do together. We need to help the public feel that way so that we can be sure that the end of Walden's story is not the end of Quindaro's story.